Let's take a look at misconduct of corrections officers. The major types of corruption by correctional officers and other officials in institutional corrections include the following: accepting gratitudes for special consideration, accepting gratitudes for protection, mistreatment or extortion of inmates, mismanagement, and malicious abuses. Misfeasance are illegitimate acts done for personal gain. Malfeasance are costs that violate authority. Nonfeasance are acts of omission. Research identifies different types of prisoner abuse as follows. Malicious abuse. This type of abuse inflicted by individual officers intentionally, including excessive use of force, rape and sexual harassment, theft, and destruction of personal property. Negligent abuse. This type of abuse is also inflicted by individual officers, but not intentionally, and includes negligent denial of medical care, failure to protect, lack of responsiveness, and negligent loss of personal property or mail. Budgetary abuse. This type of abuse is a system-wide issue and refers to policies including overcrowding, inadequate medical care, failure to protect, elimination of visits or other programs, co-payments and surcharges, and the use of isolation units. In a wide range of research and reviews, both current and historical, corruptions in corrections indicates that corruption tends to occur in patterns. Patterns of corruption seem to occur when there's a deficit of resources, including understaffing, deferred maintenance leading to decrepit facilities, and a seeming lack of care and attention from top management. Research has indicated that the very nature of a prison may encourage an abuse of power. Correctional managers attribute misconduct to low pay and poor screening during hiring. Law enforcement has made great strides in developing tools to help hire the most qualified individuals. However, corrections is decades behind in the research into the use of assessment tools in those processes. Another individual explanation of misconduct is post-traumatic stress disorder known as PTSD. As in law enforcement, a few correctional professionals will be crooks first and officers second. They use the job to pursue their deviant interests. Many others, however, probably slide into corruption because of a lack of organizational support for ethical behavior. A prison is an interesting place in that individuals work together over long periods of time, and often they live in small towns where acquaintances and family members also work in the prison. It cannot be denied that the very environment of incarceration facility sometimes brings out the worst in people. Another way to understand prison corruption by staff members is to consider the procedural justice research. The concept of procedural justice includes the idea of the perception of legitimacy comes about when the elements of procedural justice are present and treatment is fair, specifically participation, neutrality, dignity and respect, and illustrate trustworthiness. Research has shown that if legal authorities are perceived as legitimate, this leads to people following the law, even without monitoring, and encourage rules following. There is no ethical or legal justification for punishment that's not the product of formal due process and restrained by legal guidelines, regardless of what the inmate has done. No ethical system supports such conduct. Even under utilitarianism, the cost of justice and due process is just too high. There's a growing realization that this country incarcerates too many people and that prisons are warehouses, not places of reform. If such a shift is strong enough to permeate the culture of corrections, then we may see fundamental changes in the ethics and expectations for correctional officers and other correctional professionals. It is important to note that most professionals perform their jobs ethically and with integrity. The principles of procedural justice seem to show the most promise in reforming the prison culture. If correctional officers are managed under the principles of fairness, voice, respect, neutrality, and trustworthiness as described, they can be and will be more likely to treat prisoners in the same way. This approach can be described as evidence-based in that there are research findings that show supervising people under these principles does achieve behavioral change. A major shift in the ideology of punishment may be spurred on by economic burdens that the parental harm era has generated. The cost of imprisoning so many people simply cannot be sustained. The historical origins and analogies to restorative justice can be found throughout recorded history. Many advocates believe that restorative justice appropriately places the emphasis back onto the victims and can be life-affirming and positive for the offender as well. Peacemaking corrections also offers an approach of care or looking at what needs to be done with both the heart and the head. Such a model may offer an offender the opportunity to squarely face his or her own responsibility. Programs under the rubric of restorative justice include sentencing circles, family group counseling, victim offender mediation, community reparation boards, and victim education programs. Restorative justice programs are looked upon with favor by some victims' rights groups because of the idea of restoration and restitution for victims. Restorative justice programs may lead to a greater sense of mission for correctional professionals and therefore decrease burnout and misconduct. Restorative justice programs would not be appropriate for all offenders. There will always be a need for incarceration facilities for the violent, recidivistic offenders who need to be incapacitated. Correction professionals who agree with the premise are more likely to conduct themselves in an ethical manner.